Good morning. Nice early session. So we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit of an informal panel, but very excited to introduce a couple of my colleagues. As you can probably gather based on the title of the session and why you've chosen to attend, we're here to talk about change management. Office 365, the cloud as an evergreen service, is continually updating. New features, new capabilities are being introduced on an ongoing rolling basis. And that delivers a tremendous amount of value to organizations, but also shifts the way that IT has traditionally thought about change management and making available capabilities to users, to businesses, to mission owners within agencies. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the real-world experience managing change within an organization. We'll start out kind of high level on how we think about change management in general, and then narrow into how do we do it within Office 365. I'll ask in just a moment our panel speakers to introduce themselves, explain their background with change, with IT, and then we'll save plenty of time to allow you to ask questions as well. So as we go along, think about what's top of mind and what you would want to hear and your experience, and we'll answer some questions also. So maybe just starting here with Marco. Marco, what's your background in change management, in IT, and where do you join us from?
Well, thanks for the introduction and good morning, everyone. My name is Marco Rena. I'm from ABB. My job title should be somewhere on the slide. What I do at ABB, what my team does, we envision the future of the workplace, and we make sure that this vision becomes a reality. In essence, we always ensure that our employees get access to the best possible, that's important, best possible technology, best possible device and solutions to do their job. That's in essence what the team does. Digital workplace is part of the IT organization, is a strategic planning team. We have an end-to-end accountability within IS, so our role is to define strategies. So set the vision for the future, define strategies, defining the business cases to make sure that these strategies can be executed. We steer the implementation of the solution, and in this context, we're responsible to define the customer journey, the user experience, and to the point, the change management, especially towards the end users. Interestingly, we remain accountable in the end for the adoption of the new technologies. So it's quite an interesting role because it's one of the few at ABB that crosses all traditional IT towers. So speaking by change management, we see both sides, toward the users and towards the internal organization. And 365 came to ABB as outcome of one of the strategies that was developed years ago.
Fantastic. And before we ask Mike to introduce himself, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Office 365? At what point did ABB make the decision to use Office 365 and then go through migrations, and from where?
Well, for us, going cloud was a strategic decision. It's taken years ago now. And it came, actually, at that time we were having discussions within the IT organization. I was probably one of the two guys going around talking cloud in a very traditional organization. I mean, ABB is a huge Swiss engineering company, and IT department was very traditional at that time. So I was going around talking to management about we should move to cloud, we should consider possibilities, just getting a pushback. This is not good for us, we're big ABB, we do on-prem, we're better than anyone else. The real trigger came from the new CEO at that time, who really wanted to change the perception ABB was giving to customers from being a very solid traditional engineering company, that was our customers who were perceiving the company, to be seen as very much innovative and on the cutting edge. And going cloud was CEO vision towards IT to support this type of transition. That's how the story started.
Fantastic. Is that relatable? Folks in the room, organizations going through digital transformation. If you've been to probably any session this week at Ignite, we hear about modern workplace, digital transformation. ABB has been going through that, and it's really exciting to be able to hear about your journey and your experience. Mike, from the Microsoft team, what's your role, and how do you participate in change?
So my name is Michael Ziak. I'm responsible for everything related to incident and change within the Office 365 fabric. My organization does the onboarding with all of the engineering teams of the services. We deliver the roadmap and message center communications, as well as when things go bump in the night, we're delivering the communications via the Service Health Dashboard. I joined Microsoft as a part of an acquisition. This was about 14 years ago. Microsoft bought our company, which was called Placeware. It's a web conferencing company, turned into live meeting within Microsoft. And that was truly going into sort of the lion's den because Microsoft was just a software company at the time. And teaching and learning about services and going from that acquisition and bringing in FrontBridge, which is the email filtering service, and then running BPOS, which was our predecessor to Office 365, and then taking on this accountability, which is to make sure that we deliver rich communications to you so you're able to run your businesses, take care of your users, and not have to worry about what's going on in the background is really what I think of my accountability as.
Fantastic. And Naomi?
Hello, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Good? Yes? All right. I'm excited. You guys here are the rock stars, I have to say. So for being here, number one, early in the morning, but number two, most importantly, for actually realizing that all of this implementation of new technologies like Office 365, it's really about change, right? It's not about the technology and the tooling. You guys know this already. It's really cool. I can keep up to date with lots of tech stuff. But it's actually how I deal with change inside of my company. And that is kind of the hardest problem we have to deal with, right? Yes? Yes. Okay. All right. Yes. This is an interactive session. I can see you. You can see me. This is not the TV, right? So you guys have to actually participate. So my name is Naomi Moneypenny, and yes, it is really my real name, just in case there's any confusion there. So, I got it from my father. Let's see. And I work in Microsoft now. I'm very new into Microsoft, but definitely not new to the Office 365 space. So for many years before, I was a Microsoft MVP, and I helped customers to really implement and to change and learn from how all these new technologies can actually benefit their business. So now I am a senior product manager in the SharePoint, OneDrive, and Yammer team, which is pretty awesome because I get to see all of these cross-platform initiatives that we have inside of the company from a modern workplace perspective. So it's actually a really interesting job to see how Microsoft deals with change internally, because we have our own set of problems too, it's a big company, and really thinking about how that actually then transforms out to solutions that are actually most useful to all of the wonderful folks out there. So looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. And just very briefly, I will introduce myself as Brian Levinson. I'm a product marketing manager in the Office 365 team. And I specialize in change management and large enterprise use of productivity services. Prior to joining the product marketing team, I was a technical account manager for about 6 years, working directly with large organizations, adopting Office 365, dating back to the very early BPOS days. So I also have been living this journey and very excited to talk about it a little bit. Now, I know we've been warming up through this discussion, but I want to warm up the change management topic a little bit. Starting with Marco, can you talk about changes that you've implemented either in your life or in the work setting that have been hard and easy, and a couple of maybe strategies that have helped you succeed in that along the journey?
Well, in the personal life, many changes. I mean, if you ask for one, that for me happened the same year, it was back in 2014, is I became father, I changed country, and I changed job. But for me, I grew up in Milano, always stayed in Milano, was quite tough, to some extent. On the other end, it was easy, because it brought benefits. So, as person, I'm open-minded, I'm Italian, you know. I'm quite open-minded, I'm open to changes, but how do I tackle personal changes? I like this quote from soccer, keep the eyes on the ball. That means keep the focus on the good things rather than the bad things, right? I try not to worry about things I don't control. I try not to worry about what may go wrong. You know, actually today's the first time I'm on the stage in front of an audience, just to be clear. And people were asking me, are you nervous? And no, because it doesn't make any sense. You know? Yeah. If I'm nervous, I'll probably do disaster, so who cares? I don't worry about this type of things. So that's how I try to manage changes, and I apply excellently the same philosophy or approach into the business context. Okay, I'm not the type of IT, and I grew up in an IT organization at ABB. I moved from help desk to operations, to PMO, to architecture, I'm missing development because I have an economics and marketing background. That's the only role I miss. For the rest, I like changing jobs. I like running projects. So from that perspective, I'm absolutely positive towards change. They bring in possibilities. That's my strong point of view.
Fantastic. Mike, how about you? Any changes in your life and strategies to make them successful?
Well, I think certainly for me, and tying back to the acquisition and coming into Microsoft, it was about how do we change the culture of the company and really drive down a service path. That was a very different mindset when you think about the old days of delivering software, and your sales team is going in, they're selling you some sort of EA on a bunch of software, and then there's not a lot of are you using it and how is it being used, and developing that sort of, hey, we need to have a very customer-focused mindset around how our customers are using the technology on a continuous basis because they can easily leave us. And that was a significant sort of activity to learn how to operate inside of a company of 100,000+ employees, on top of the fact of we were a cost center very much so in the earlier days. I mean, our service was not the size that it was, and convincing a company that developed software, had high margins, as to what it was to run a service was pretty significant. I'd also say still today, you know, we have the conversation with our IT organization, hey, Mike, can you have this stuff off by default? We don't want this stuff on by default. And it's like, no, you're going to have it on by default like all of our customers and make a decision about whether you want to have it deployed. So, you know, from an empathetic standpoint, the same concerns that you have, our IT organization has had and brought forward to me. And it's been a really interesting journey to sort of get to a place today where I think we've published a white paper now of exactly how our IT department has deployed cloud services, and highly recommend you read it. But that has been a really interesting journey over the years for myself. It changed me personally, as well as I think the company has changed as well.
You know what has happened at ABB in this context? When we announced that we'd have gone cloud,
Yeah.
their existence came from the IT organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Mainly people feeling threatened. We may lose the job, we may need to get new skill set. Truth is, whoever managed to go through that journey in a positive manner develop a unique profile. Because now they see both sides.
Yeah.
And this made people, or this gave people a kind of unique experience, knowing the company, knowing the model, driving the transformation, and getting the new things, getting the new models, made them a unique profile. The ones who were really open all got into new jobs.
Fantastic.
So this has to be solved and explained. And I was explaining like this in the beginning, but getting just, you know, little trust. Say, yeah, but Marco, you're saying because you're on top of the program. In the end, they came back to me and said, you were right. They're still around.
Yeah.
All the ones who were super worried, they're still around. That's how we won at that time the IT existence.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing that inside of your organizations? If you're going to the cloud, is that resistance coming from inside of IT because we feel threatened, or things are changing, or my SQL databases are not going to be next to me on the desk anymore? Are you feeling that? Yes? Okay, a few people. All right. So the rest of you guys, are you on Office 365 online right now? I just wanted to see who's in the room. Okay, all right, good job, good job. All right, everybody who's I'm on-prem and forever. Okay, anybody there? Okay, all right, there has to be one. It's like, you know, it's all good. I have to do that. Just was checking on that. This is sort of interesting because it is some of that path, and I want to echo Marco's point there really, and what Mike was saying, because like in my own personal experience, it's like, I got into working in information technology, into computers, because I like working with computers, right? I like doing this techie stuff. I like to do programming. I like to do algorithm development. I spent 15 years of my life doing machine learning algorithms before people knew what machine learning was, right? And now it's everywhere, of course, but I did all this stuff. And the reality is, I started out as this techie person because I wasn't really great with people. And now my job has never been more about people, right? Are you guys seeing that inside of your own, and so in your own departments too? Yeah?
You're seeing a shift.
Yes. So, and it's like, yeah, I went into tech because I like working with tech. I didn't want to deal with these people, right? It's like, and now it's all the change management and how we use the tech and how we deploy the tech is all about how do we actually get people to help with that change, and how do we actually now have the situation where technology is actually outpacing what we can handle, right? And so for many years, it's like we had to adapt around what the computer was doing, and we had to modify our thing, and we were waiting for the technology. And now suddenly there's like so much stuff and so much information, and you're like, holy smokes, I'm the slow one here, right? So it's like, it's been a really different change over there. So, come to the mic, come to the mic.
Just come on up to the mic.
Come on, let's make this interactive and get to the mic.
I've got to drink what you're drinking.
No.
I'm like, wow.
I'm always like this in the morning. Hands knows me. I'm always like this. So, go for it.
Regarding what you said is you deploy all of these new services on by default.
Yep.
And I work with school districts. We support about, it's not a lot, 25,000 people. But the frustrations we have is all this stuff gets deployed to all these people, and management, for instance, groups and teams, management just got announced recently. So all this stuff was out for so long, and all of a sudden we're trying to manage 18 different organizations and trying to keep them separated for for sanity. But we're having all kinds of groups just. Everything gets applied with the default domain. We have about 20 domains in our tenant, and so it's a mess. We're trying to keep things prepended with the school district or the organization and their domain. But if teachers try to create classrooms, it gets 4th hour, 5th hour. Well, that takes up that name for the other school districts that have a 4th hour and 5th hour. So. Is that been brought up to you, or will that be addressed, the speed at which all this stuff is being thrown at us, and then the management not even in place yet?
Yeah. Well, so I think it comes into two forms. One is we announced yesterday a commitment to a category of change that we call major changes. And with those, we'll have a set of promises around the amount of notification that we give, that you'll have an actionable period of time to be able to control that within your environment. I mean, the one thing to recognize, if you go back a few years where we were primarily software, most every company was deploying on a 3 to 6 year basis, and we were developing software on a 3 to 6 year basis. And you think about how many bugs an engineer can develop over 3 years period of time and deliver that to you, and your environments change over that period of time. So the reality of it is we are not going to be successful, and you're not going to be successful unless we can figure out how to deliver that change in a way that allows you to consume it in an incremental fashion. I'm not saying that we're perfect, certainly your experience would suggest that, but we are committed to giving you the capabilities to be able to manage that change more effectively, to make it less disruptive, and in the case where it is something that we would consider impactful, that your user experience, workflow, new capability, et cetera, that you're going to get the time to be able to make a decision about, is this the right time for my organization? I actually have a gentleman from Johnson Controls where they've actually taken our ring methodology of how we deploy out to the service, and they've done that inside of their company where they take the licensing, they default it to off in their environment, and then they deploy in a ring model very sort of predictively across their user base. So I think it's tough to answer specific instances, but I can tell you that our commitment is around making it easier, giving you better communications, and giving you the controls to be able to have a predictable outcome for your users.
Yeah, I was at that session as well, and I love that deployment method. The problem is we see it's just given to us in the tenant on by default, and then a lot of times it's reactive. Oh, we got to shut this off because we've got 50 different groups made, and I don't know what they are. And so, if just a suggestion from my part is, if I love the weekly digest, if we're made aware of this is available, here's how to learn about it for a couple weeks, and then give it to your people in that ring method.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to chat with you afterwards, because there's some really cool things that we announced in the change management space to help you do that. And this whole concept of how we manage major changes is around giving you that greater predictability. So thanks for asking the hard question.
Yes.
Yeah. She does. Okay.
Fantastic.
That's a good one. It was a good one.
That was very good feedback. So I want to understand a little bit more, Marco, and then maybe Naomi, some of your experience as well.
I don't know where we're getting that feedback from. Is it me?
So,
Must have been me.
do you want
I
to?
don't know. There we go. Apologies for that.
Yeah.
See if we can figure out what's causing it.
I'm curious, as you've moved to the cloud with ABB and Mike, with your experience managing some of this, and Naomi working with lots and lots of organizations, how are you seeing change management shift? How do you think about supporting your users, whether it's formally with a help desk or through community? Are you seeing a transition within your organization and even within your user base?
Yes, that's my simple and short answer. But also to the point of the question, I mean, at ABB we had actually the same challenges. You recall when we met first time. When we migrated to 365, there was nothing. No message center, no Office website, nothing. So things were happening overnight, and we were experiencing the morning after. I had a very fun story from the day before the pilot. It's actually when we met. When Microsoft changes one of the IP range somewhere in the world, and all of a sudden we're not able to access the platform any longer. You know, if that happened in production, it would
You're
have been
welcome.
a disaster. That's when Mike stepped in to help us. But at that time, you know, we really had nothing. Now there's a lot. You guys are doing great thing. That's honest customer feedback. ABB is not a nice customer all the time, but this is credit to Microsoft. And we're facing the other type of challenge. Now there's too much. So what we're doing internally, we filter a lot changes. We focus on, first of all, we define the changes that we want to tackle. We have, 3 levels, like low impact, medium impact, and high impact. We don't care any longer about low impact. We simply let them go to see what happens. How they find the impact is impact to the end users on their habits on workflow. It's a bit of artistic job, but that's what we do. We focus only on the measured ones. Different reasons behind it. The users have no capacity to digest all of this. I mean, they don't read all this communication. Even at the moment it would magically come out of the message center in a perfect manner, most likely 80% of ABB employees, they will not read them. They will simply let it go. That's consideration number one. As IT, we don't have the capacity to stay on top of all of this. So all these improvements are very much appreciated. What we do is we focus strongly on changes that comes with a, let's say, measure impact to the end users. This could be either a migration from technology A to technology B, or Teams is absolutely a measure change. So we're working a lot in that direction. Now, in this context, yes, we see our users much more excited to work with IT organization. You know, when we introduced 365, we created a change management framework, very traditional. There was a one-time big effort. And now we're moving more and more into early adoption programs, prototypes, engaging with business, observing as they work, enabling new capabilities, collecting feedback. That's what we do more and more, and it's accepted more and more because users see the benefits. The changes are good, by the way, because that's a key point. With a wrong new functionality or something implemented in a very wrong manner, there's no change management that support all of this. We can only mitigate. So it's a great improvement of Microsoft. And this is recognized by the end users. You know, that's how to say, important consideration because this also drove us to do change management in a very different manner compared to what we used to do in the past in IS. It was very traditional. Direct communication, articles on the intranet, a lot of information, and at a certain point we start to get a strong pushback.
Interesting. And Naomi, when you work with organizations and having recently joined Microsoft, have you also seen a shift in the way that either you would recommend people approach change management and drive adoption within an organization?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a few strategies that I've seen work really well, both from an IT perspective as well as getting kind of your employee base, your user base really in shape as well. And so there's a couple of things. So the first one is to have that, as we were talking earlier, that sort of rings internally. Like when you think about who gets that new functionality, don't think of it as just IT, right? Our traditional way of doing that is to switch on all of that new function for IT. We play on it and we see if it works and if something breaks and that kind of stuff. But our level of what we understand this is useful for is not at the level that we need oftentimes from an end user perspective, right? And so we can test it for tech and its breaking and those kinds of sort of technology changes. But what we actually need inside of our business units is finding those people who are actually highly motivated and like to play with like the new shiny technologies, right? And so I would always advocate that you have some sort of community aspect to this, right? Where you're having a community support, whether it's peer-to-peer support, and it's not something that you have to say, okay, we as IT are going to fully support this new thing that's coming out, but you know you have users that are pushing the boundaries, right? You know you have users who are always like, I want to use this new tech, or I want to use this new thing, right? And I was like, we'd rather use that energy, right, than to like say, no, be the guardians, because if we are the gatekeepers and we stop them from doing that, that's how we get more shadow IT in the company, right? Because they go off with their credit card and go sign up for some other service that you probably already get in Office 365, right? So it's one of those things. So we want to stop that kind of thing. And so often as IT, I feel like we feel like we have to hold change back like a dam, right? And it's like a dam, and if we just hold it back long enough and we're strong enough and we build the dam high enough, we can protect our users from change, right? And in fact, what we have to be is a sponge, right? We have to let it trickle through slowly. And so thinking about how you create communities of practice inside of your organization, where you roll out maybe first release type of capabilities to selected users. And you look at like all of the financial analysts who get super excited about all this new stuff we've seen with Excel and Power Insights and all this kind of cool stuff, right? How do I have a community of practice? And you can use an Office 365 tool to do that, right? You could use SharePoint with Yammer, you could use Teams, you could use Yammer by itself. There's a whole bunch of technologies there that you could use, and have that be that community area for people to support each other on their adoption journeys. And you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked at like how much people actually find like new ways to use a tool or new ways to make it work inside of your company. And that helps you also to assess a lot of times how valuable something is. And so some of the tools that you might not play with as much, maybe things like Sway, for example, right? Something in Sway, we're probably not going to use it that many times in IT, but your corporate communications folks are going to love it, right? And so, and those, like, you can make them so happy with just that little functionality change and like let them support each other. And so don't feel that burden so much inside of IT of like, there are core applications that we have to support, we know we have to support, but then there are others we can release to our business users and say, hey, this is on a community support basis. And if something breaks or if we have to upgrade the platform or wipe the data or whatever it is, right, you can have that contract with your users and to think about how to work that into how you adopt and release these new technologies. Has anybody used this kind of approach right now? Because I've spoken to some customers this week who've done that. Okay, so a few of you working. Okay, all right, that's good to know. All right, since you've been patiently standing there, I have to come say, come on, go for it.
Well, expanding on the question, or the topic at hand,
Sure.
we've started actually rolling out some small changes, and we talked about major changes before, small changes without really telling anyone. An easiest example of this is we're upgrading our SCCM thing, and the client from the old one to the new one, you log on, boy, it looks different.
Sure.
And we're doing this one on an experimental basis without the change management involved. We're just saying, hey, look at, because of what Apple has done to us, and that is, hey, the outlook is different, here's what it comes. We're just saying, hey, look, when it comes in, it comes that way. We told the help desk is the one folks that are informed this is going to happen. How successful is that approach, or is that going to bite me in the butt?
No, I think you could have a community piece on top of that. Because the first person, there are people, you know these people in your company already. There are people who are like, oh, I noticed this new thing, right? And like they want to be the first, right? They want to be recognized that they were first to notice the change, right? I know you guys have them. I know you do. You may be some of them yourselves, right? So just admit it, right? So if you need the new shiny and you know who you are, you're the people who stood outside the Apple store and, you know, waited for the Surface and all those kinds of things, right? You know who you are. And so if you're that person, have that group, whether it's inside of Yammer or in Teams or wherever you want to put that community. It could be some other platform, obviously. But have that Yammer group to really think about, like, posting, I noticed a change, or is this something I should expect, right? And that one answer that you post there can be seen by a zillion other people, right? And so they recognize that both it is just a change. I don't have to pick up the phone and deal with press 1 for English and blah, blah, right? Which is also, you know, a big issue sort of just from a help desk and reusability perspective. But have that one person. Let our users help to solve each other's problems, right? And so I realize this is IT and we have to deliver support and service delivery and those capabilities. But people will help each other right? And so it's kind of good. And then you can say, hey, yes, this is a validated answer, and this is what we expect from IT in those kinds of areas. And so it's making that message so people can serve themselves quickly, just the same way as you would do with all that change in your consumer technology, right? You would just call somebody, or you'd look on Facebook or whatever it is, right? You do the same thing, right, to check out if this change was real or new or different. And so thinking about how I can do that in a supportive community that's inside of the company and get recognized for it too also works out.
And Mike, in the context of that, how do we at Microsoft think about providing the information so that IT can enable the users, or even just self-service?
Yeah. So if you look at, I think, sort of the North Star, our engineers are developing software for the end user. IT is an enabler of that. I mean, one thing I want to just generically commend all of you in the room. The one thing that IT is, and I mentioned this to Marco when we were chatting over this the other day, IT is the best connected organization within any company I've seen. We want to give you the tools and the capabilities to be able to empower your users. And ultimately, our job and what we're trying to do is deliver that information to Message Center, to the roadmap. I mean, our roadmap is extraordinarily transparent to the point of being maybe a little bit overwhelming. But it's not if you're in the area of SharePoint. Hey, I'm a SharePoint, I'm a collaboration productivity expert. An individual there is going to be able to consume that information. And how do we get that information out to individuals within your organization? Message Center, with the new release, which we just announced, is now going to have rich multimedia capabilities in it. So we're going to have embedded videos. We're going to have rich HTML. It's not just going to be a, here's a link to a link to a link type of approach to content. You'll actually get that content, in many cases, delivered directly in there. We're working on, but haven't delivered, for example, a role that will allow individuals inside your organization to look at the Message Center without having to be an administrator to the service. So you can start to democratize that. Everything we're trying to do is to allow you as an organization to drive productivity for your users rather than worrying about the administrative headaches that go along. Great. Number one we took away the need to worry about hardware and upgrades and so on and so forth. But that's only part of the problem. The whole end user education, your governance concerns and so on and so forth are the things that we're trying to break down the barrier to next, because you're in the business of productivity for your organization, and that is different from for every company, and you are the best people to understand that, and we want to give you the tools and capabilities to manage it. I got a line of people now. Okay. By the way, they're winning 4-0. I just want to call that out. So
he walked over. He walked over.
Okay. It's not plugged in. Okay.
Playing the field.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Thank you for this. This is a really interesting panel. I have to admit, I'm one that struggles with a lot of this because I come from traditional IT background, and I'm trying to embrace the idea of change. So I work for a financial organization. Maybe this is a good question for both ABB and Microsoft. With the embracing of shadow IT and different applications and the possibility of your data ending up in different services all over the place, how do you handle protecting your intellectual property, your sensitive information, from the idea that everything is always on by default and you have to turn it off, and then you have to figure out all the places where your data could be at risk? How does Microsoft and ABB kind of deal with that whole paradigm?
Let you go first.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because I will not be able to answer in the details about what we do, but you're totally right. We accepted or realized at a certain point the shift was coming. So we've always been a very traditional IT organization, and we're still to a number of extent. We realize it strongly. New cloud model is coming. It's not an option. It will force us to change in a way or another. So with this idea in mind, we wanted to be ahead and be in control. So we focus a lot in shifting from the idea of protecting the perimeters and the data center and the computer to protecting information and content. And in that sense, yes, we use a lot of technologies or products from Microsoft moving towards this direction. It's hard for me to answer more because we have strong policies about what we can talk in public about security and compliance and regulation, but I can tell you that ABB, not in all the business, but we operate in highly regulated environment. We have critical business projects, critical information into the cloud nowadays that would have not been possible to have 2 years ago due to our policies. Are we doing in a less secure way? Not at all. I think nowadays there are many different technologies able to help in that direction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think on the Microsoft side, again, we are a corporation that uses cloud services. We're trying to embrace sort of the end user empowerment. Now, when I go into a document and I save that document, it actually is asking me, is this sort of low business impact, medium business impact, high business impact? And we're teaching our employees what that means. Every employee has to go through a training session that explains what is the data. That's the important part. It's like, what is the information? What is critical? What is not critical to a business? And let's educate them on that. And then give them the self-serve tools to manage it versus IT trying to control it. You know, in a great sort of example, I was doing an Ignite session last year, and I had a customer come up and go, Mike, love your technology, but Jesus, you keep giving us this stuff, and I have to support it. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, OneDrive. And I said, do you like it? And he said, love it, but I have to support it. And I said, what happens when you don't support it? And he said, all my users start using Dropbox. And so the reality of it is that an individual will seek the path of least resistance to get their work done. IT can become an enabler of that to allow them to deliver via the path of least resistance, or try and be a stone in the water, and then the water will just figure out a way around it. And so ultimately we're trying to build in a manner, but we as a company are dealing with the exact same things you are. How do we make the users more and more aware of the data that they're dealing with? How do they manage it, making them the accountable party? Because that's really where you need things to be successful. It can't be managed centrally anymore.
The other thing that I would add is that it is also Microsoft's responsibility to not only ensure that we're building solutions and services that are compliant with ISO, SOC, FinServ requirements, regulations, GDPR, the big exciting one, but also making it clear to your organization what is compliant with what, where is the data stored, and giving you the controls to make the decisions if it doesn't meet your regulatory requirements. And that's part of what Mike was alluding to with the major updates concept, where we will tell you as something is approaching first release. We're renaming first release targeted release, just as a side note. But we'll tell you when it's getting there and give you the controls so that should you need to turn it off, you have that ability. Then if you want to take the approach where you roll it out to IT, to power users, and then to other business units, but not certain business units, you have that ability. But it's absolutely our responsibility that we are providing solutions that meet your business requirements as well.
Great. Just a follow-up question, actually. Something kind of came to my mind. When you talk about how if you don't give a user access to OneDrive and they'll go to Google Drive or they'll go to whatever box or whatever, but kind of building on that idea, if a user wants to use Google Drive over OneDrive because that's what they like to use, they're going to try to use that. How does Microsoft and ABB treat that? Because now that's their company IP, their company information. That's you possibly lost track of, and you can't access. Company leaves the employee leaves the company, and all of a sudden you don't have access to their personal drives anymore. So that's a risk.
It is absolutely a risk. I would say that within Microsoft, we're taking a couple of different approaches. The first is what Mike alluded to, or had directly explained, with training. Everyone at Microsoft is trained on what is PII. What is the information that our customers provide and trust us to maintain and not mishandle? And that's been ingrained into us as part of this digital transformation that we've gone through, as part of being service providers and not just product sellers or developers, is also we need to maintain the trust of, frankly, everyone in the world, which is a little overwhelming at times. And then the second part is that we're building into the technology intelligence and capabilities that make it hard to mishandle. Things like Azure Information Protection, or the predictive classification, where if you put in, and data loss prevention, for example, if you put a social security number, a credit card number into an email, it can automatically apply rights management such that you can't then forward that email outside of the organization. Or that document actually can't be uploaded outside of OneDrive or opened by someone outside the organization. So it's a combination, I think, of both user education, because ultimately, if I wanted to exfiltrate a credit card number, I could write it on a piece of paper and stick it in the mail. If I wanted to be very malicious, there are ways to get creative, but really a vast majority of the time, it's people, it's the education. It's making it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. I don't know if from an ABB perspective, you have training courses or anything like that.
No, I mean, to your point, absolutely. To me, it's mainly education. Of course, we're looking at all the possibilities offered by technologies. We profile the users. I mean, in ABB, the workplace team has a lot of power in terms of defining the level of user experience. So we decide on technology a number of times, and we're trying to put in place this more and more. Truth is, the behavior can bypass whatever we do in technology. I had a story from the past where Microsoft was giving a presentation to ABB under strict NDA, not shareable, nothing, and I was complaining a bit, saying, guys, we're a partner, right? I would like to share with my team. No, that's impossible. So presentation was done through Skype, RMS, super protected. So I was taking pictures, one slide after the other, and then I send it back to the speaker saying, look, here's the entire story about security. So in our case, we focus a lot on education. That's one of the new type of consulting job that IS can take. And sometimes we tolerate. Now it's cruel truth. We lost a bit the control compared to what it used to be in the past. Many possibilities, and I don't think we can block as company everything that comes. So we still have usage of Dropbox at ABB. We never blocked it in the past because when we went 365, OneDrive was not exactly the top-notch tool in the world. So we tolerated. Now OneDrive is getting up to speed, and we're thinking about how to move content. But differently from the past, we're not migrating. So we're not initiating a typical IS migration project. We're brainwashing, educating users. They're moving their content because the new platform's working better. They don't need Dropbox. On the other way, we had customers working with us using Dropbox to share. That's what I mean by it has to be tolerated. Highly regulated projects, highly regulated environments, we take dedicated actions. So we're fully aware Dropbox is not for everyone. OneDrive is fully utilized at ABB, but certain content not supposed to be shared in that specific manner. When it comes from outside, there's not much that we can do.
I'm going to pause for just a moment. I know we're about out of time. We'll be happy to take the question and continue talking, but if you do need to leave, we also understand. I just wanted to share very quickly that we do have some new training courses coming up. I wanted to pull this up, so I'll leave it here if you want to take a picture of the aka.ms/365 enterprise. There's a lot of material here that's quite useful, but we'll continue talking, and then also we'll be available afterwards to answer questions. But go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I actually want to follow up on the gentleman's question about managing this large EDU environment. And I think it's important for people to understand that Microsoft has just such a broad, massive customer base from mom and pops to US government, and they can't do it all, right? And so they have one of the world's largest partner networks for a reason, because we're out here to fill those gaps that you have. And particularly, Brian, you and I have talked in the past, for us, you know, being one of those partners, we built our platform specifically for the enterprise to fill those gaps. So, you know, people want to be, for these large organizations, they want OU and group policy for 365. They want granular RBAC, you know, so they don't give their admins global rights to all their users. They want integration with on-prem AD. Microsoft will solve that problem. We've already solved it. But we're one of many service or partners that Microsoft has to fill these gaps. And it's the kind of things that people are asking for large orgs are different from what you get today. And PowerShell can be a limiter when you're trying to get your help desk to be productive and not escalate tickets to your senior staff, because those tools aren't available from Microsoft. But guys like us, partners like us out there, are solving these problems and filling those holes while you're waiting for Microsoft to do that. So yeah, it's a little bit of marketing on my part, I get it. But it's important because we get approached all the time with these problems, and Microsoft folks send them to us and other partners, because there are a number of us out there that are solving these problems. So go to the show floor, talk to these partners. We're out there filling the gaps because Microsoft can't do it all.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
So our network team struggles with change in terms of URLs and IPs changing. Is there any kind of automated way to address those types of changes, or are they going to have to follow up with
The short answer, if I can get there quickly enough, is that there is a website where we publish all of the endpoints for Office 365. Let's see if the Wi-Fi cooperates.
Yeah, while he's bringing that up, some customers have actually written automation against the site to basically harvest the information that we're publishing there. Again, it depends on how rich your environment is, how frequently it's changing, but if you want to invest in that approach. We've got a couple of activities that we're driving internally to reduce the number of IP address ranges so we don't get into this situation of having to constantly publish updates against it. The other thing is always a recommendation for customers to look at why you're using IP address filtering as an example versus some sort of FQDN model, because ultimately those don't change, but the IP addresses may change. And I certainly understand some older hardware requires you to do so, and so on and so forth. But we do keep it published, we keep it updated, and there are customers that have actually written some PowerShell and otherwise to effectively harvest this information.
Yep. Also RSS in a PAC file, you can download it as well. So this is a super useful site, and I don't know if you saw, but I just went to Bing and searched Office 365 endpoints, and the first result.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge is, I would think that this would be automated outside, right from the get-go. And you're telling me that I've got to write a PowerShell script to automate this. So it to me seems like a lot of extra overhead.
It is a little bit of extra overhead
our
to manage the
struggle
network that
is
way.
with Skype, and we're trying to get our users to use Skype, but their Skype calls are failing. They struggle to join meetings. The sharing sessions are dropping every minute, and
Let's chat for a minute afterwards, because I'd like to get an understanding of why it's creating the challenge. I mean, I'm not saying that other customers don't face some of the challenges, but generically, if you think about the scale, it's working. So to try and figure out why it's creating that. Is it a one-time deployment issue or otherwise? But when we're done, let's chat for a few minutes. Okay, thanks. Any other questions, takers?
I also did want to just quickly call out the URL down here at the bottom. Mike mentioned that MSIT recently published a white paper. Microsoft's IT department has also been shifting. Our company has been moving to the cloud. All of our users have been moving to the cloud. And so MSIT spent some time and wrote down how they've managed that transition. They've actually changed the titles and the jobs descriptions for almost everyone within the IT department. And they fundamentally transitioned and shifted the way that they think about their responsibility to Microsoft as a global corporation. It's a really fascinating paper, and highly encourage anyone to check it out, give us feedback, maybe leverage some of the best practices or share your own as well. Yeah, please.
If there's time. I like your discussion here. One comment from a customer. Regarding you mentioned the major release warnings, but my experience is that Microsoft's definition of major releases, what could have huge impact on your organizations, is not always our experience, because small things like changing default value in the shared dialogue in a group could have a huge impact on our users, because they're trained, they know which value they should use to share on the right way. So doing the filtering internally and not always trusting what Microsoft says is huge changes. I think it's really, really important. But as the other guy mentioned, just getting all the changes that are coming in one list would be really, really useful for
So if you flip back to the major definition, we tried to be liberal in the definition, including things like things that impact user productivity. Now, that's a little bit open to interpretation, but if you rewind a couple of years when we deployed Clutter as an example, we were like, hey, here's a new feature. We don't need to tell the IT pro about it because it's just some new end user mailbox thing. And this came out of that, because outside of a few death threats from customers when we deployed that, we learned significantly as to how to manage change. This is actually getting published. That is not to say that this may not change. I mean, ultimately, it's up to you to give us feedback to say, hey, you've got this definition. Hey, this should have been categorized as that. Because then we can go back and we can actually educate the engineering system that actually controls and curates this to actually manage it in a different way based upon your feedback. So this is not an endpoint. This is part of our evolving journey, and giving that feedback if we missed something or if we didn't hold true to our commitment is what we rely on you to let us know.
we'll certainly do so. And as a follow-up in terms of, we're establishing our digital workplace organization as we speak. So I'm wondering in ABB, how much resources do you spend leading the change management, leading the community, the rings, communicating changes, following, up on Microsoft's lists?
Well, more and more compared to the past, but overall, the number of FTE in the department is not changing because moving cloud, we could free up capacity in traditional IT roles. That's what I meant in the introduction, saying people going through this journey are developing unique skills. Now, the people looking into the change, they understand the user, they understand the impact on the IT organization. That's how we can be quite effective in defining what we want to take care of and what we simply let it go. So it's not only from the user perspective, but overall the IT department is not growing up. We see a shift, that's recognized. And to the point, yes, now we're rethinking the way we want to have our IT organization working in the future. I mean, this is going to happen. Cloud models will transition IT roles. So we'll be less and less technical running the technology and more into business alignment, business consulting type of role, having the knowledge of the technology and the background to play this role perfectly. That's what we see happening at ABB, and that's what we see mostly recognized from the users and the business in terms of value compared to the past. Now, I don't want to oversell myself, but what we're doing in workplace today is, how can we say, is the best rated activities of IS as reported from business people.
Thanks.
And I do want to be respectful. We have another session coming up. So happy to continue the conversation. We'll just do so off to the side. Thank you very much for your time this morning.